This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
I gotta ask this of Chris and Hunter. How did you become aware of us? Because I'm operating under the idea that we're kind of unknown.
I heard you guys, speaking of Chris, I heard you on Forbidden Knowledge News.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I was like, I like these fuckers. These guys.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, because it's easy to get sort of cynical and bitter and like you become callous to this sort of information, and it tends to can make some people kind of pessimistic and bleak, and you guys don't seem like that at all.
And crazy.
No.
And crazy. Yeah, fucking nuts.
There have been times I've felt crazy, but sure. I understand. Yes.
What were you saying, Joe?
We're your optimists. Yeah.
Hell yes.
It's hard to find.
I wholeheartedly agree, and we feel pretty optimistic too. So actually, we feel very optimistic, especially when you realize that everybody talks about how it's a collaborative reality that we're all in, and so they sometimes simultaneously forget to collaborate in a kind of responsibly positive and forward thinking way. Sometimes it's easy to get concretized and sort of numbed out to this stuff. So I think it's important to stay not numb. Whatever the opposite of numb is.
I think that, but also, I think that the predatorial aspect of humanity feeds on fear and feeds on anxiety and feeds on a sense of apathy and helplessness.
Yes.
So the more they can entrench that in people, the stronger it bolsters their narrative and their perspective.
Sure.
So the more freedom we can exercise, even just in freedom of speech, I think that the more free we are.
I would have to completely agree.
Yay.
Yeah, it gets really tricky, because once you tiptoe up to the precipice of realizing that the very people that you admire and our hope are pulling the weight for our side of things,
mm-hmm.
and yet they seem to be bolstering the matrix in a lot of ways, it can be very disheartening to think like, well, is there anybody on our side?
Yeah.
Is there anybody on side Team Freedom? Because there's a lot of people that put all their hope in a Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Or even more fringe, like
don't get me started.
Yeah, and then seeing him make moves that are just nonsensical, like, hey, he's doing one thing and yet this other thing seems to be contradictory. How is he boostering for the matrix, boostering for the shot, the clot shot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When we would expect him to have our backs on that and say, no, it's your right to decide. Well, it seems to be playing both sides at once, and that can be very confusing for people. So I don't blame anyone for taking the black pill, but if you take a step backwards, you can kind of see a bigger picture. You know what I'm saying?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't really put trust in any politician. I think once you get to that position, you're so compromised, you're not working for yourself anymore. You're just a mouthpiece for a bigger machine. So Trump is the same way. I mean, he's just disguised as an outlier, as somebody who's there to, do something different than anybody else is going to do. But, he did have a different way of going about things, and he did speak his mind, which I thought was refreshing. Just that thing in and of itself. The fact that he didn't give a shit what anybody thought, but beyond that, not really much different than anybody else.
I just use Leonard Peltier, Julian Assange, and Ed Snowden as the litmus test. And if any three of these men were pardoned under any administration, then I would say, hey, okay, so maybe this person is walking the walk. But when those people are ignored, and Leonard Peltier's been in jail for decades now,
it's ridiculous.
And I think the first thing with like the Obama administration was, and all these people were drinking that Kool-Aid. I was like, well, what's his stance on Leonard Peltier? Why is he not exonerating him? Why is he not releasing him from prison? And when there was always this backpedaling of, oh, well, he can't really. And I was like, this guy's just another fucking puppet.
Exactly.
It's amazing on how the excuses can just fly out ad nauseum when it comes to this situation. And, speaking of not being cynical, I'm with you. I feel I'm very similar with Joe in our perspective on how we feel about this situation. Mm-hmm. And essentially, I call it, we get limited hangouts. Everything's a limited hangout. There's always that little tease that somebody's going to come out and do something. There's always that little like, they're putting it on the tip of your tongue. They want you to taste it just a little bit to think that there's going to be a big announcement.
Exactly.
But nobody's really going to make an announcement. It seems like almost.
For sure. I totally agree.
I think the key word with figures like Trump is that Trump is an actor. Joe Biden is an actor. Hillary Clinton's an actor. Barack Obama's an actor. Michael Obama's an actor. We just see we see all of these actors, and that's all we get. And so don't expect to see anything else on stage besides actors. Yeah. That's where we get our emotions all wrapped up in this, and it's silly for us to do that, because don't expect the Matrix to feed us anything other than acters.
Exactly.
That's like, what does Cypher say when he wants to go back into the Matrix? He goes, I want to be someone important, like an actor.
Yeah, exactly. That says it all right there.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because today I was talking to someone about that whole realm, and I was saying these are the most insecure people that I've ever met. I worked in the Hollywood system, and they are narcissistic and insecure, which is a highly dangerous combination. So if someone becomes a politician, they're just feeding into this need for power and a need for control over others without really having any legitimate, I would say, impetus to help anybody other than themselves and feed their own ego.
I would have to completely agree. And, one thing I've touched on in a lot of my shows is how, even if we're entertaining the common narrative or the basic narrative, human psychology can prove a lot of conspiracies true. Just basic human psychology and basic human nature. And even in a couple of the articles that I've listed from Psychology Today, speaking of, the fear harvesting that Hunter was talking about, that's what they do to manipulate us. That is how they keep us in their grip and in their control. And it's almost a vicious cycle, because we're almost advertised narratives. Joe and I call it the Truman Show analogy. Mm-hmm. In this reality, instead of being advertised products, you're being advertised narratives and trains of thought. And whichever narrative or train of thought that you buy into ultimately becomes your reality and adds to the collective reality. Yeah. And then if enough of the collective believes a certain narrative or train of thought, that ultimately manifests into said reality.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the power of manifesting right there. Like, if they can just fuck with our minds, then the rest will do it'll manifest itself. If they can steer our attentions and the power of fear, that's the easiest crop to harvest, really. Sow seeds of fear. Most people don't even have any direct contact or much direct contact with the outside world. They get it through media, various forms of media, whether that be your phone or 200 channels of TV or whatever. So and they totally trust all of those forms of media. So if all of that media is telling you to be freaked out and that we should be suspicious of every white person and this, that, and the other, then people are just going to eat that up. It's safe, and it's also safe to feel fear, because then you it's kind of, while making you afraid of other people, it solidifies your tribe identity. So then that just completes the whole cycle of the us and them narrative that makes it all go around, makes it all work.
But it's also feeding product placement.
That too. Hey.
So it gives great opportunities for people who are selling products to help reinforce fear. So I just remember in the beginning of the whole pandemic nightmare, when we started to see the stock of like Amazon go up, and how billionaires were increasing their wealth by 150%. That it was so fascinating that so few people that kind of fall into like what we would call normies were even like tapping into that and saying, oh, well, I'm getting another Amazon today. Amazon. It's like you are feeding a beast that is not really for your greater good, that does not give a fuck if you live or die. So why would you keep feeding that? Why not learn to, I don't know, plant a vegetable, or how to work on some solar energy or something that makes you a little bit more autonomous. But I think that that's been an unintended consequence of all of this, is that some people have really risen to the occasion and become autonomous. Have you felt a shift in how you live your life pre 2019?
Who's that question for?
Both of you.
Yeah.
So yes, most certainly I have felt a shift in my life. A little bit of a backstory. I woke up back in 2008. My co-host is lucky. He's been awakened since birth.
Welcome.
Born on 9/11 too. I'm sure he'll get into that with you.
Wow.
But,
I love it.
Yeah, born on 9/11, but 2008. So I've had kind of like a really big objective chunk of the timeline to look at when it comes to everything going on, the current narrative, and in 2019, 2020. All of the stuff that I had been talking about at this point for a decade, I'm watching starting to come true before my eyes. And, and I'm like, wow, okay. And, at first, that's actually when Joe and I first met back in, 2019, 2020. And we were kind of like the pillars of light in the little bit of darkness we were in. And it definitely changed how I live my life for sure. I've always been about self-sustainability. I've always been about autonomy and sovereignty. Always have been. It's always been a big part of my life. If anything, what that's done is made me kick it up a notch and really start to practice the preaching a lot more, as opposed to, actually just talking about it, being about it and doing these things. And that's really initially what had me start this podcast is, this was my way. This is what I could do. This is, I felt at this time was the most productive thing I could do to help share information, learn with other people, because I always say that we're learning together.
Absolutely.
The farther I come on this journey, the less I know. And that is definitely the biggest thing. And if anything, it's really kicked into gears, a solution-based mindset instead of focusing on the problems and just focusing on building new earth now, before the old one's over. So
absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, in a similar way, I saw 2020 as kind of a strong indicator that a sifting process had been initiated. So when the masks, and that was like a precursor to the vax mandate, and I saw that whole thing getting initiated. The Mickey Willis video with Dr. Judy Mikovits came out on YouTube, and it was immediately censored. The censorship got initiated, and I saw, okay, so this is a sifting process that's getting kicked off, and this is our opportunity to essentially announce to the world who we are. So all you have to do is just not wear a mask and walk into your local grocery store and smile for the cameras, because it's all being recorded. And they're trying to find out who this is not going to land on very well, who this communist, fascist dictatorship is going to rub against. and it'll be a minority. They knew that. But then it'll be a chance for those people to stand out and be maybe persecuted, not very much, but a little bit, like lose your job maybe, or get kicked out of a grocery store, get tackled to the ground by local law enforcement, whatever it happens to be, get snitched on by your neighbors. Those people would find each other. So this was a search and find kind of program being initiated. And I couldn't help but see that there could be a benevolent purpose behind it. For me, I kept seeing the image of a Mack truck with a brick put on the gas pedal being driven into a wall. Maybe a Mack truck that had a payload to destroy humanity.
Yeah,
but
nitroglycerin.
Instead, somebody put a brick on the gas pedal and jumped out of the driver's seat and just said, "We'll see where it lands." And then Trump came along with his slogan, Operation Warp Speed.
Yes.
And I thought, this is interesting because Trump went on record in 2014 saying that he thought that vaccines were causing autism, and that might have had to do with his son's autism. And that was before he had any kind of vested interest or political leanings. And he went on record as saying that. And so when he came out in favor of funding Pfizer and funding Moderna and funding this vaccine, I took a big step back and said, this doesn't add up. This doesn't add up. This is not what you'd expect from a more libertarian leaning Republican president.
Yeah.
It seems like he would be espousing caution instead of saying full steam ahead, Operation Warp Speed. And that phrase, warp speed, really got my attention. He's saying something else in the midst of funding all these people with the Davos money, right?
Yes.
You can do a lot of damage to a program by simply messing with the timing of the intended program, by speeding it up a few years. That offers a lot of exposure. So where I see Trump kind of falling on a sword for the people in a way, by saying, I can't do other than to endorse this vaccine. I'm going to call myself the father of it. You all are going to hate me because of that. And you're right to do that. Because that's the end of his play. That's the end of his character on the stage. And the point was not for Trump's popularity. The point was to show those motherfuckers in the media, these people that you think love me and will do whatever I say, will follow me so far and no further. I will tell them to get the vaccine, and they hate you so much that they won't do it, even though I'm telling them to. That was the point of that whole exercise. It was really kind of brilliant when you step back and look at it.
For sure.
Well, he was a pundit back in 2007, 2008. Just when you were a wee lad. He was on Fox News. And that's when they really started to kind of bring him out in the Dog and Pony Show to see, well, I mean, even farther back than that, in the 80s, he was on Phil Donahue, and they said to him, oh, would you ever consider the presidency? Would you ever consider being the president? He was like, no, I would never do that. There's no reason. I have no political aspirations. So he's been out in the realm of the public eye for decades and decades. And in 2007, 2008, he started, which I found hilarious because this was kind of in the height of his Apprentice show. They started to kind of bring him out as some kind of a political expert. And I remember thinking, this guy's been bankrupt 7 times. Like, he has myriad lawsuits against him in New York. He basically licenses his name to people, and then those people go off and make successful businesses so he can take the credit for it. Like, he's a fucking snake oil salesman. Like, I can't believe anyone would ever believe that he's going to be a decent president. And back then in 2007, I said to someone, this asshole's going to be the president. And they were like, no, you're crazy. You're smoking weed. You're high. No way. I was like, mark my words. He's going to be the president. This is the way that he used to be a Democrat. Now he's going to be a Republican because they're different, right? And
well, no difference. He used to be a secular humanist, and now all of a sudden he's a Christian. Like, come on, it's total bullshit. Like,
there's been a lot of flip flops, especially, and I mean that's what they do, and I mean that's just really It's funny. I've always said he was a cause and effect. He was put in to cause a certain effect, and it definitely did divide up the people of America, especially even further into the political bipartisan paradigm. And that's what we kind of see with this is there's always somebody coming along in this bipartisan system who is promising everybody the world, and I call it repeating insanity. I watched people do insanity every 4 years in this country, trying to repeat the same process over and over again, expecting a different result.
Exactly.
And then go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
So rewind the clock back to 2016. So the night of the election, November 3rd, 2016, I had voted for Gary Johnson. Okay.
Yay! Right here, Betty. Right here.
I couldn't explain to myself why I was so ecstatic that Donald Trump had won.
I know.
Over Hillary Clinton.
That's why.
And then I heard a comedian, I think it was Ari Shafir, on his podcast, Skeptic Tank, and he was saying, like, he explained why I was so ecstatic, and he said that the Americans were presented with a choice between the status quo or brick through the window. And they chose brick through the window.
That's great.
And I thought, okay, that explains why I'm so happy that he won.
Yeah, I knew Gary Johnson was never going to be the president. Gary Johnson knew he was never going to be the president.
Right.
I think he got to a certain place in the election cycle where the deep state came to him and they were like, this is what we're going to do to you if you get into this position. And he was like, I heard him have he was on this interview and he said, I don't know if that my family is ready for this.
Right. Oh, and by the way, I don't know how old you think I am, but in 2008, I was buying my first house. So
at 8 years old, that's amazing.
I was the youngest. I'm the youngest. I was just a couple years fresh out of high school back then. So.
Well, he didn't say that he was born on 9/11/2001.
Oh, okay. That's why I was like, wow, you're a baby.
I was born. I'm 40 years old. 1982. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Gotcha.
You've been vetted.
I just when he told me his birthday was 9/11, I was like, no. I was like, let me see your driver's license.
I gotta see the receipts. Exactly.
It looks a lot like Thomas Anderson in The Matrix. They show a picture of his driver's license.
Yes.
A lot of the same numbers are on there.
I bet.
Well, it's because once you get to know who he is, and then you see he's born on 9/11. And it's like, wow, that's a synchronicity.
Exactly.
So
it was all meant to be.
It was all meant to be, and it's funny how Joe actually has his own show. He does Syrup Tap on Rumble. He does his own thing too. And actually, this whole project, I guess you could say, kickstarted back into being summer of 2022. I had a particularly interesting experience that summer, and so did Joe as well. That kind of just what I could say peeled another layer of awakening off for us. And really, that's kind of what set forth us even diving even further into this and kind of throwing ourselves down the biggest rabbit hole we possibly could think of.
Well, I want to hear more about all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do tell.
Well, so actually in our in one of our BG Tap interviews, we have a show. It's called the Philadelphia Experiment, and what it is it recounts a situation that happened to Joe in Chester, Pennsylvania. I personally believe he got a real live peek behind the curtain. I really think he did a physical peek, which definitely, Joe. Why don't you enlighten them?
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is in keeping with some of the stuff that I've heard as content on your show, people sharing paranormal kind of events, and I'm not I've always kept my eye open for paranormal things, but I'm not one of those guys that like sees everything. He sees one every day.
Yeah.
So the only time I've ever seen something very strange in my life up in the sky, because we've all seen like the satellites that blink, and they could be UFOs or they could be anything, right? Way up in the very, very stratosphere. But this one, this is something I saw while working on a job. It was a little power plant in Chester, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. And it's right next to, it's kind of situated right next to the Delaware River, right next to a Boeing research facility where they do experiments on rotor blades for helicopters and things like that. And I couldn't really tell you why I was selected for this job. I don't do a lot of work in other states besides Colorado. But somehow I found myself on this little crew of guys traveling to Pennsylvania. And my attitude for that trip was just go with it. I do a lot of controls. I'm kind of a controls guy. So I have a niche in the electrical field. So it made sense that I was part of this group, or so I thought. Anyway, one day there was kind of a storm outside. And I went outside to pee. And there, the main tent where the workers were supposed to take break and lunch blew over.
Wild. Wow.
And he froze.
Holy fuck.
Oh no.
He's glitching.
He'll pop back on in a sec. There's a little bit of thunderstorms going on out here right now, so it's probably to be expected. But no, I'll let him recant you his when he gets back. No, we had it's interesting how it's two different stories, Chris and Hunter, and they both led to the same conclusion, which is very interesting. I joke that Joe had the experience that he needed to, and then I had the experience that I needed to, that brought it all together in the end. And it's funny, mine does involve plant medicines. However, due to the current research of plant medicines, that DMT works with serotonin to modulate how you perceive your visual reality. So if you increase those levels beyond baseline, do you perceive more reality? I absolutely believe so. And
I like it.
This experience I had was so real. It goes down under the most special day of my life next to my wedding. At that point, That's how real it was. Yes. And thanks. So I was in my basement. It was the beginning of June, summer 2022. And I actually had some dimethyltryptamine left, and I was in a good headspace and a good mind space that day. So I decided to partake. So I did my, meditative practices. I do breath work, yoga, qigong and stuff, and got ready. And I embarked. And I remember as I'm holding it in, things were different this time around. It was very bizarre. I was coming on a lot faster and a lot stronger than it ever had. And then basically the best thing I can say is reality decompartmentalized around me. And there were these seven beings. Now, they were very tall. They had to have been at least 8 feet tall. They looked almost seraphim-like, but they had like these serpentine bands of energy coming off of them.
Wow.
And I remember I was dripping in this water because this is down here in this podcast layer I have here. There's no plumbing or anything above. And I'm like sitting there, I'm like, where's this water coming from? And then I heard what I would say. Now, when I say telepathic, I use that term loosely. A telepathic response. I felt it in my chest, and then I felt the emotion that was conveyed with the response in my chest, which is still to this day the most whole bizarre thing about that experience. I was like, it seems like a higher language. And I hear the water is a medium between dimensions. This is how we could come to you and we could contact you. And I'm sitting there like looking up at these 7 seraphim looking beings. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, Stephen, we want you to come with us. And I was like, okay. I was like, all right, I guess we're going. So I ended up astral traveling with them to this place they called the True Garden of Eden. And it was a very magnificent place. It was like this crystalline city, and it had these flowing green pastures all around it. And I was looking in the city, and I saw humans, it looked like, from all over the universe. And at that point in time, it was like, I feel like we're a universal species. We very well could potentially be. There's different playing fields all over the place that could be a little bit different than ours, but slightly the same in certain ways. And after that experience, these beings took me and showed me how fabricated this reality was. And this is kind of what broke me a little bit in this experience, because I had always believed that this reality was heavily fabricated. And I've always, kind of wanted to see it for myself, but to the extent that I saw it was, I think, what is kind of almost like broke me a little bit. And when I came back from that whole experience, I was like, oh, I need to go back to the spiritual drawing board, it seems like, at this point, because this reality is heavily fabricated, even more so than I thought, and it kind of made me dig in a little bit further on this potentiality that could be that a lot of things that are presented to us are fabricated and staged events, especially with the CIA in Hollywood having the revolving door policy that they do. And it's very, a good example that I always bring up. I don't know if you two saw this, but there was that snippet, that news snippet. So it was a mass shooting survivor, and she was vacationing with another mass shooting survivor. Yes, you guys saw that?
Yes.
I did not. No.
So she was vacationing with, so these two mass shooting survivors were vacationing together, and then somehow they ended up in another mass shooting, and they just happened to be there for the camera after the sheriff got done speaking to the press to get up there and spew anti-gun propaganda.
Yeah, it was at the last mass shooting, the one with the
No. It was so this is a really good example. That's too much of a coincidence, don't you think?
One of the women, her child had been killed at Sandy Hook, and the other woman was, I think, Parkland, and then they were both at, just fortuitously, they were at the mass shooting with the non-binary transgender person who came into the Christian school.
Yes. And this is exactly like what was really like a big eye opener to me, to see that. But so the one thing, one of the common debates that you have with that topic is why would they do that? So, and the number one thing I always talk about, so you're looking at people who not only have an abundance of resources, but they create the resources.
Yeah, exactly.
If you created the resources, anything's game, right? If you wanted to sway the opinion of people, or, point the general population into a different direction of sorts, that you would like them to see, it's very easy to do so. And I think that's been the disconnect between, the American citizen as of right now, and when it comes to what's really going on, they've become so, and I believe it's purposeful, that they've become so far removed from what things actually mean and how things actually work. And one of the things I like to say is, I even entertain a common narrative, money talks, BS walks, right? So everything's essentially a business. So let's look at who funds the media. We have Raytheon, we have Boeing, we have DARPA, we have,
BlackRock,
we have, so is the average person going to speak illy of or out against who pays their paychecks? I don't think so. And this is even where it comes down to that basic human psychology that I think can really help when it comes to relaying this message that we all do, that can actually help kind of bring it down to that level. So the common person, or whoever, I don't use the term NPC. I think it's mean, but that's just my opinion, just so the common person can understand.
It's more Stockholm syndrome than NPC. So it's protecting your abuser, basically, as one way you can look at it. But just quickly, what I wanted to point out is the product placement in films is a really great starting point for some people. So you go and watch a movie, and you can count how many products you see that we have become so maybe immune to. oh wow, there's a Coke bottle that's facing perfectly toward the camera. There's a Captain Crunch box in the back there. I think a lot of people are so desensitized to seeing that stuff that they don't realize, oh, these companies have paid to have their products in this film. And the way they've paid is to fund the film.
Exactly. Oh, he's back.
I like what you said. Hello.
Hey, sorry about that.
I'm glad you didn't get struck by lightning. Do you have missing time, Joe?
I feel like we have missing time.
Well, I just think, like, I'm sorry to say, but I know what the internet overlords' agenda is, and their agenda is to fuck with certain stories getting out. And so I'm sorry, but this has happened before, and I hope it doesn't happen again. You know what I mean?
You want to give it another go?
Yeah, it just gives you street cred. That's all.
I agree. I like
Steven,
the street cred.
Did you finish your part of
that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let Joe go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know what you may have shared with him, Stephen, in the interim, but what emerged from that cloud was a craft that was maybe no more than 20 or 30 feet off the ground. And it was flying from the funnel cloud towards the Delaware River, kind of over my shoulder as I was standing. And the strange thing was I had gone outside for no particular reason. I had to go to the bathroom. And then when I reached the porta potty, I suddenly lost the urge to go to the bathroom. Like, why did I even come out here? So I didn't go into the porta john. I just turned around and was going to go walk back into the building when I saw this thing. And at first I thought it was just a trash bag kind of stuck up in the wind, just a black speck. But as it got closer, I could see that it was a perfect ring. And from my eyes estimation, it seemed like it was maybe 3 feet in diameter. It was flat like a coin, but a ring with a hollow center. And it looked kind of like an aerobie back in the day, if you remember those Frisbees that were just a flat ring, except for it was white on one side and black on the other, but not the kind of black that was just black. It was like a sucked in light, like a black hole black.
Yeah.
And the other side was shiny white, like emitting light. And it wasn't flying flat like a disc. It was tumbling like a tumbleweed, like a gyroscope. Have you seen a gyroscope kind of change all different directions? Sure. And it was moving maybe at about 30 miles an hour from that cloud over my shoulder and moved out over the Delaware River where I lost sight of it. I had the thought maybe I should take my phone out and get a picture of this thing, but I thought it was maybe too small, or I just never had the full impulse to take out my phone. I just was so entranced by this thing. And I didn't think much of it at the time that I was seeing it, but I did walk inside and tell my friends that I was working with, my new friends that I just met. I just saw this craft in the sky. It was the craziest thing. This is what it looked like. It tumbled. It was like a ring. And the only thing that makes that memory so clear is that after that, every night and every moment after that, for the next few weeks, I was having these downloads, like piecing together pieces of my childhood with movies I'd watched and albums I'd listened to, and seeing time as like a flat circle rather than a linear timeline. It changed my whole outlook on a lot of things. Wow. It pieced together a lot of things that I'd been thinking about, but not putting together. Things about the pandemic, things about politics, things about current events. And I ended up texting my immediate family and texting, close friends and relatives that I hadn't talked to in a long time, saying things that were probably from their perspective very uncharacteristic. Like, for example, I told my wife that she should tell her brother, who I'm not very close with or anything, that it's going to be the Good Will Hunting ending.
He even messaged me. I remember him texting me during this, and it was very out of character for him. And I ended up asking him, I'm like, "Are you all right?" And he's like, "I have to tell you about what happened when I get back."
Yeah. So from my perspective, I was having these telepathic connections with things. I texted old girlfriends. I texted a lot of people, just saying like whatever popped into my head, which was very outlandish. And one morning, a few days later, I woke up. This was after Easter. So Easter, I'd taken off Easter, even though if I'd worked that day, I would have made double time. That's per union rules. You can make twice as much money if you work on a holiday. So instead, I just said, no, I'm not doing that. This job is going fine. We don't need me to work here. I'm not gonna. I just want to take the day off for some reason. And that day, the downloads were super heavy.
Interesting.
And I think this is where the timeline gets a little fuzzy, and I think I might have had some lost time in this. I woke up the next day, and not from like a state of grogginess or sleep, I was just immediately awake. And some things I had brought with me on this trip for no particular reason, I didn't know why, I just put them in my suitcase, were $6,000 in cash and a package of brand new Bic lighters. So I was working on a crew of 4 people. I was one of 4. I went downstairs in the hotel lobby. I took the $6,000 in cash that I had brought, in paper money, and I divided it into 3 piles of $2,000 each. And I just put it on this table in the lobby of this hotel where we were all staying. And I put a brand new Bic lighter on each of the piles. And I said to the lady that was at the front desk, I gave her $50 and I said, look, I'm playing a little joke on my friends. They're about to come down here and they're going to have breakfast. And when they do that, when they all 3 show up and they're all sitting at the table looking at this money, I said, I owe them some money. When they're all 3 sitting at this table looking at this money, call my room. And, this is going to be really funny. Just watch what happens. And so she says, okay. And she takes the $50 and I go back up to my room. And sure enough, she calls me up about a half an hour later and says, okay, your friends are sitting at the table. They're looking at the piles of money. So I texted them this text on the group chat, right, on our phones, because I had all their numbers. I said, I'm not going to share all the explicit language because I really played it up, right? Like this was a dramatic moment. I essentially said, look, if you guys, here's this money, burn as much of it as you deem necessary to cleanse your consciences. When you have arrived at the correct answer, text me back the answer. But realize that if you don't do this, then your wives are going to get raped.
Oh my
God.
He was slightly unhinged during this time period.
Wow.
I'm not trying to absolve myself from any crime here. I'm just telling you how it went down. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You know?
So
okay,
what were the
so
reactions?
please, what happened? You can't leave us hanging with your energy drink or whatever the fuck you're doing.
So at first, I got a text from the one friend, and he said, dude, what's going on here? And I said, don't try to cheat your way out of this. I need to know how many bills you burned to cleanse your conscience. And so at the entire time this is going on, we're being late for work now. Like, so this is like the clock is ticking. We're supposed to be going to the job site. And instead I pulled this extravagant stunt. So I'm looking out the front window of my hotel room down to the vestibule where all of the, where you drop off your luggage, if you're staying at this hotel. And I'm looking to see who shows up because I figured it's going to be either a cop or an ambulance or the 3-letter agency,
or an asylum.
I've sufficiently baited them into this, because I've done something very strange. And what I haven't mentioned yet is that the night before, I had already gone down to the truck with my luggage all packed, and at 3 a.m, and one of my other coworkers was down at the truck at 3 a.m. just smoking. And I said, "I'm ready to go." And he says, "Well, go where?" And I said, "Well, to the training facility." And he goes, "It's not time yet." He said, "It's not time yet." Goes on smoking. I just bring my luggage back up to the room and go back to sleep. This entire time I wasn't sleeping very well. I was, in a different kind of space. But that was just one day prior to this whole event. So up comes this red car. It's not a cop car, it's just a red car. And I said, "That's my car."
Okay, so was he one of the guys with the money, the guy who was smoking?
Yeah.
So he knew already that something was going on.
I would suspect they had to realize that I was not the same guy that they had left on this trip with, that something had happened to me.
Right.
So anyway, they were probably concerned for me, and I can only imagine what was going through their heads.
Exactly.
So I went down to the lobby, and as I was going down to the lobby, I received a text from my lawyer that said something to the effect of, "You've just won the Freemasonic National Treasure."
It starts to get interesting.
Great timing, bud. Like, that's very odd coming from you. But I was already headed down to the lobby to talk to law enforcement or whoever these people were. So I get off the elevator, and there's 2 cops waiting for me as I come off the elevator in the lobby. And they say, "Can we take your cell phone?" And at this point, I had no obligation to give them my cell phone, but I did. Sure. I just said, "Okay, sure, take it. I got nothing to hide." So they take the cell phone for a good 20 minutes, and they just have me sit down at a table in the lobby. And I said, "Wherever we're going, I'm ready to go there right now." And they said, we heard you brought guns with you on this trip. Is that true?" And I said, "Yes, I did bring 2 guns with me. They're up in my room. One's in the safe and one's in my suitcase. I don't have them with me." They didn't frisk me or anything. They just took me at my word. So I'm sitting down there, and the two cops look kind of nervous, but I wasn't nervous. I was in this ecstatic frame of mind for some reason. So I said, "I'm ready to go right now." And they said, No, we are not ready to go. Just hold your horses and wait here for a bit longer. So this whole time they have my cell phone with them, and they're doing things to it. They're manipulating it. I don't know what they were doing to my phone. But as a side note, when I did go back into my phone, there was no text from my lawyer. There were other texts from my lawyer, just not that one particular one.
Weird.
So it was almost like, did I imagine that? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not the kind of guy that imagines things, Like,
yeah.
If I got it, I got it.
Did you bring it up to your lawyer later and ask if they?
A little bit. I did have a conversation with him later, and he just acted like he was totally unaware of the situation. But with these situations, okay, what's important to understand is that when it comes to technology, any entity can enter into that conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
So he might not have been physically aware himself that his identity was being co-opted in my phone.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that sounds crazy, right? But that's
not at all. Not to us.
No.
There's actually an incident, if you don't mind me chiming in real quick, Joe. There's actually an incident I did on my my gang stalking episode where they have evidence of a really hard case of evidence of someone's phone practically getting hacked into and making it look like somebody sent a text and did not. It's a very bizarre phenomenon.
Yeah. Speaking of which, later on at some point, I would like to. I listened to the hospital gang stalking episode, and I would like to dig deeper into that. I hadn't heard of that before, that phenomenon, and I would like to go further into that. But Joe, are you?
Yeah, for sure.
Did you finish your story?
No, there's no way.
Of course you didn't. Of course
No,
you
no,
didn't.
This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of the story. So when I handed my phone over, it was kind of like me saying, I think you guys are benevolent entities.
Yeah.
And whatever you're deciding to do with this phone, I'm letting you know that I've got nothing to hide.
Right.
Because if I was hiding something, it would be in this fucking phone, right? So here it is. Do with it what you will. And when I got it back, certain texts were missing from it. Like certain things that I would have liked to have shown my family to say, hey, look, I'm not off my rocker here. Like this is what was going through my head. But those texts were gone conveniently, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So when I was waiting in that hotel lobby, two gentlemen came in. They're both black in plain clothes, not police officers, or they didn't present to me any badges or anything. They were just kind of dressed up in what you might see like some stylish guys wearing to church on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And they're big guys, like maybe 4 or 5 inches taller than me. And they weren't upset. They seemed as in the same kind of mood that I was in, very happy, ecstatic, inexplicably so. And this was all like a prerequisite because I was ready to go right then. I said, like, wherever you're going to load me into, an ambulance, a cop car, let's go. They said, no, you got to wait. So these two guys shuffle in, and one guy looked kind of like LL Cool J, you know, the lead guy. And the other guy was, you know, just a good looking black gentleman. And they wanted to hear me read them the text that I had sent to my friends. So they handed me back my phone.
Did they ever identify themselves like by name?
Yeah.
Did they ever say, I'm Frank, I'm
from
Tim?
No,
or
there was no badging, no credentials, but they were interested to hear who I thought that they reminded me of.
Interesting.
Very, very strange.
Yeah. And this was and I was at the height of my telepathy at this point.
Right.
And I was thinking like, okay, I'll use my telepathy and I'll figure out who these fuckers are. But all I was getting was like the Black Eyed Peas. that was the only image I was getting in my head. And I honestly couldn't even think of LL Cool J, although that was the obvious choice because the guy he was a dead ringer for LL Cool J.
Wow. Maybe it was.
Screen memory.
He even had on like the derby, kind of like the
Kanglo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so these guys were smirking the whole time because it seemed like they knew what the text had already said without me even reading it.
Sure.
And the awkward part was I used the N-word in the text. I used that line from Pulp Fiction.
Oh my God.
Wow. Awkward.
Yeah.
This is genius. This needs to be a film. I'm just saying, like, this is great.
So I read it for them verbatim, and they just, when I got to the N-word, they just started laughing. Okay.
Where are your coworkers at this stage?
They're not here. They're up in their rooms or something. You know, they're traumatized. Okay. I'm sure they're highly traumatized.
Right, but not in the lobby, not in the restaurant, nowhere you can see them.
I did see a couple of them one more time before I left town, but that's much further into the story.
Okay.
So I kept saying like, okay, guys, I'm ready to go to the training facility. Whatever you've got cooked up for this whole exercise, I'm ready to go. And so this kind of took them off guard. They weren't expecting me to be ready, and they weren't expecting me to be expecting to go somewhere. So eventually an ambulance pulls up and they say, okay, we're ready. It must have been like an hour in of preparation, just me sitting in the lobby shooting the shit with these guys. They made an exercise of calling my wife. He takes the phone from me. He starts explaining things to her that I'm not exactly privy to. And then they load me onto this ambulance, and I'm just sitting in the ambulance, not like strapped down or anything. And the guy on the ambulance wants to know who he reminds me of.
How weird.
And I said, and I was just looking at him right on this. It was only about a 10-minute drive from the hotel to the facility. And he's looking at me, and he's starting to tear up as he's looking at me. I'm just looking at him. we're just, kind of exchanging glances, and he starts to like get choked up, and I can see that he's getting choked up. So I said, like, what's going on, man? And he wants to know who he reminds me of. And I don't know if I was supposed to think of somebody from my past or from my childhood, but he reminded me of Bobby Moynihan from SNL. So that's what came to mind. So that's what I blurted out. You remind me of Bobby Moynihan. And he says, okay. I don't know if that was the wrong answer.
Did he cheer up after that? But the two black guys said that too. They said the same thing. They wanted to know. That is, and then
they corrected me, because when I said somebody from the Black Eyed Peas, he goes, well, I'm more of this guy. Wow. And I didn't know the guy that he referenced. Like,
that's like a how good is my disguise sort of thing.
I know. It was that kind of feeling.
Did your wife ever tell you what they said to her on the phone?
Well, yeah, they told her I was going crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, they were totally gaslighting her. And I was like, I hope they're not gaslighting her, because I don't want her to freak out,
Yeah.
They were gaslighting her, though.
But she did freak out.
Well, of course.
Yeah. And so did my whole family. And I'm still dealing with the aftermath of all that, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, very nice to meet those fellows.
Wow. Super, super, super intense.
Yeah, Joe's story was pretty freaking crazy.
I love people who can tell a story that is so visual that I actually feel like I'm there when it's happening. And I felt that in several moments. And I like that it was somewhat confusing, where I was thinking, okay, has he lost his mind? Has he found his mind? Has he gotten some download that has kind of given him some altered sense of reality? Like, the money thing was so interesting, that he took $6,000 with him, that he took, just the whole thing was so. I would have mailed my phone back when I was going back home. I wouldn't have taken my cell phone. I would have been like, let me just FedEx this.
Yeah, no shit. Or just cancel my subscription to the crucifixion, in the words of James Douglas Morrison. What was I going to say? Yeah, it's reminded me of a story out of an anthology called Tripping. You always do that one.
I'm sorry.
Just
sorry.
Accommodate. You have a spine.
There we go.
Out of a book called Tripping, which is an anthology of people's drug experiences.
Yeah.
And
we have that book.
I know. Yeah, I tried to get the editor to come on the show, but he saw some of the other people that we had on the show,
and he was like, "No,
don't want to be associated with free thinkers." So anyway, stop talking to your mic.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just kind of lost my thought completely. Yes, but some of those stories have the effect of a flashback, inducing a flashback. And his had the effect of just the discombobulation that it must have felt like to be in that situation. It felt like he was describing a dream, a very confusing, strange dream.
Yeah.
So odd that so many people were on the edge of being emotional or tearing up and constantly checking in to see how they looked to him. It was so odd.
Yeah. The one and only time that I ever got put in a mental health situation in a mental health facility, what you note is that it's like stepping into a different reality.
It is.
Like, the rules are different. How people behave is different. It's so not like what we call everyday life. And so I think there are energies that take advantage of that. And so that those places can be hotbeds of demonic energies,
For sure.
or people that have nefarious intentions. They can go there and take advantage of people that are maybe not necessarily in a stable state. I think the fact that he was euphoric through that, the thought that kept entering my mind and as the story progressed was, when two people are accused of a crime, the person that stays up all night and paces and freaks out, that's the innocent one. The person who is guilty is the one who goes to bed and sleeps because they know that they've committed the crime. It's the person who's innocent that knows that they're in the wrong place and they shouldn't be there. And so I think his reaction was very consistent of someone who hadn't lost their mind or wasn't mentally unstable because he was trying to get out of there. He kept seeing the cues of the things that were going on and catching those cues, like the person that had fallen out of the chair, like the woman banging her head next to him in the other cell. Like all of these things were like cues. Like, how are you going to respond or react to this?
For sure. And Stephen brought up in a few of the podcasts that I listened to of his something about the collective test. And I meant to bring that up, but there was just no good point to sort of interrupt Joe's story where I was just kind of hypnotized by it. So that just reminded me of a macro version of what seemed to be this micro version of a test of everything seemed to be a test to see how he would react and how things looked on the outside, as opposed to what the people involved in it knew what was actually going on underneath or behind the scenes. Like there was an appearance, there was a screen, and then there was something completely different taking place behind that.
Yeah. Well, the
Mask.
fact that they asked him for his phone immediately when they got there, and he gave them his phone. Basically, what he was signing off on in that moment was to be tracked, to have any of his information that was on there stolen. So, maybe the reason, and he said that they were doing something to his phone. So maybe the reason that they needed the phone was to continue the mission, whatever that was.
Which was part of it, wiping that one text from his lawyer off about the Masonic, what was it? The National Treasure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so weird because we've had weird texty things like that where you've sent me a message or I've sent you a message and the message didn't go through. And I'll say, no, I sent you a message. And you're like, I didn't get that message. And we've looked at each other's phones and you can see it from my end, but not on yours.
We should really go back to using wire, I think, or something that's encrypted like that.
That, or when you said that, I thought you meant like a wire, like talking between us.
Yeah. I mean, and when I go to work, we'd have to have a really long wire, but you're worth it.
I like it.
Have a big reel of wire behind my van.
Yeah. But we just don't want a bird to sit on it because that could get heavy.
But it's not hooked to a.
There's a lot, right? But we're doing like this, and then there's a bird sitting on it, and that would hurt.
Well, you have to have a little. You have to have a little stand where the wire could rest on, no matter what is on them.
But the wire's how the sound comes through.
You think that would muffle it? Having a bird sit on
it? It would make bird sounds come through. That could make it staticky.
This is getting crazy here. Who do I look like to you?
Joe.
Yeah, I never thought about that level of it, actually.
Joe looked a little like an alien. Like Joe had some alien energy, and I've thought that about you too.
I kept thinking of Neil Peart.
I didn't once think of Neil Peart.
Well, you don't. He's pretty prominent in my mind on any given day. So I don't think you understand how much I like Rush. I really, really, really love Rush.
I do.
I-
On our family group thread, you recently asked to watch the Rush movie and the Rush documentary and listen
documentaries. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the concert from
and
the
the
last
concert.
tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really mean it. That's a legacy I want to pass on to the kids. I think they would see it in a different light now. I got Arvo's interest because I reminded him that Jack Black was in one of them. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I love Rush. I'm there.
I love Rush.
Yeah,
though.
I don't love Rush like you love Rush.
I
love the Cocteau Twins like you love Rush.
The Rush took hold of me at a completely different time before Cocteau Twins. Those are two different chapters.
Yeah.
Rush, I got too cool for Rush when I was listening to Cocteau Twins. I kind of got, there was a period when I was like, that's old dinosaur shit, like blah, blah. I tried to convince myself that I didn't like them or that I was into other stuff, more sophisticated, artful stuff.
Yeah.
But then I just dropped that pretentious bullshit and fell to my knees, tears streaming out of my eyes. Anyway.
I don't think you're kidding when you say that.
I won't. Go ahead.
I digress. We
Stop me.
digress. We need to talk more about Stephen and Joe. I wanted to keep diving on Stephen's experience with
me
the
too.
DMT.
That's what I was going to say. I wanted to dig into that experience, but then that's when Joe popped back in, and I didn't realize his story was so extensive. And I didn't want to interrupt it. One, because I didn't want to be rude, but two, it was a very enthralling, compelling story.
I just had questions. I had to interrupt because I had to know specific things and I didn't want to forget them.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad he grabbed the book so that I could write what the year was. 4 years, 6 months, and 4 days old is Christ consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That was heavy. And just that whole thing, like the girl at the waiting room or before he was allowed inside the facility with the tattoo and looked like someone he knew. And I mean, there was just so many, the whole thing felt like a film. It felt like Inception. It felt like waking up in a dream and a dream and a dream. Like there were so many layers to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I liked about Stephen's story that he told us or started to tell us, is that felt like what, and I wanted to say when he said that reality was eroding, it was peeling away, like he was starting to see that this reality is not reality. What I was wanting to know is like, okay, well, what is real reality? What is the real thing? Like, are you talking about the earth crumbles away, or is it coarse matter? Is it the table? Is it, because I know that every physical thing is in constant motion. So these things are temporary. And so we are just agreeing on this as being a solid object, but in reality, it's not solid at all. It's just an agreement that says this is solid.
Sure.
So when he had that experience, did he see energy? Did he see the constant flow and flux of everything?
Yeah.
I like that water was involved and he felt that water was dripping on him. I wanted to know where his wife was when this was all happening, what her experience was, because it's interesting to see someone leaving their body or someone having some hallucinatory experience or some transcendental experience from the outside. What were her perceptions?
And I kept thinking of our Nathaniel Gillis interview, and like, those are demons, dude. Like, and I didn't like thinking that. Like, that's one takeaway I didn't like about that conversation with Nathaniel, is that, it's all demons. I mean, and I think I said something to that effect afterwards. Like, I don't think anything is all of anything, but that's kind of the impression that I was left with that conversation. So unfortunately, that's something that came up when he was talking about meeting those entities. Like, they're tricksters. They're just fooling you. Like, even though he seemed to have a very positive experience, I was like, they're just trying to lure you in. Like, and then I was like, I don't want to think that. Like, let the experience be what it is. Like, he got um, a positive feeling from it. So I'm just noting that came up in my mind
I
when he was
think
saying
it's
that.
what you are inhabiting. So it's what your primary energy is.
Yeah.
So if you are, everything that we ingest has some degree of energy in it. And so like I don't think that you and I are ingesting dead food. We eat a lot of the things we eat are sentient or alive and they have a charged energy. So I think if you are the kind of person who is very clear with your intent when you take DMT or any psychedelic or any plant medicine, I think what you are going to draw to you is what you can draw from your inner core. So if your inner core has some negativity attached to it, yeah, you can draw some demonic energy. If you don't have that as like your primary force, I don't think it necessarily always has to be the trickster.
Sure. But I think that naive people and souls can get taken advantage of too, to play out whatever karma they may have accrued in this early in this life or in past lives. So I think you can stumble into situations where certain things usually happen, but something can come in and take advantage of that opportunity to trick people,
Yeah.
for whatever reason. So I do think that happens sometimes, but I can't think I can't think that happens as much as Nathaniel was giving the impression that it does. But again, as I said too, he's a demonologist, so he's not he doesn't seek out angelic experiences. So he's talking about what he's heard about, what people bring to him, and what people um, come to him for questions about or situations that maybe he can help with. So anyway, I don't want to get
Yeah.
sidetracked with Nate.
I mean, maybe in some circumstances, people who are having transcendent experiences that are not negative, they aren't seeking out any consensus. So they've had this experience and they're not going to anybody to talk to them about it. They're just having the experience and that they hold that. So someone that's having a negative experience is maybe going to a demonologist because they've had a negative experience.
Yeah, of course. That's what I'm
So-
saying.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you. But I just added the positive part. I'm saying like there's plenty of people who are having positive experiences who aren't telling anybody.
Exactly. For sure. I think that goes in a lot of situations, like where people and that's where the media can really skew reality in whatever way that it wants to, because hardly they may have one human interest story in any newscast, but mostly it's going to be negative shit or things about conflict or some kind of turmoil that they can draw people's attention or lure them in with, uh, and it's not positive at all. So it makes the world seem like a horrible place when in reality there's probably many, 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 many more positive things going on than negative things, but they're just not getting any airtime.
Well, and there are people who are, elevated minds, higher consciousness, who don't necessarily need to take any plant medicines, who are having different levels and layers of experiences that uh, aren't making the news, that aren't being publicized because that's not their motivation, they're not on the radar. So, again, it's what you're saying, like, if you're focusing on what the media is saying the world is, then you're getting trapped in that loop. But if you actually go out and have real life experiences, you can have some pretty transcendental life experiences by just being awake and being aware when you go out into the world, because I think that there's magic all around us. It's just being able to tune into that and having that frequency on your own personal radar.
And cue Bill Hicks skit. I'm referring to the skit where he is talking about, you never hear my stories in the news or something like that, where I'm just going to rely on the skit that I'm going to insert in afterwards because I can't sell it. Basically, he's just saying like, we're all one. There's no fear. We never die. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. I like
blah, blah,
how
blah, blah, blah.
he ends it with that.
Yeah, that's the confusing part. Okay. Well, we're going on 20 minutes. Yes, you're not here for us. You're here for the people that we were talking to. Maybe you're here for us. I don't know. We're here for you. Anyway, thank you for listening. Hopefully you found that enlightening or interesting or compelling.
I'm here for the spiced meats.
That's for the after party.
And laughter.
The caterer should be setting that up upstairs now. And the laughter, yes. Yes. Anyway, yes, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Patreon members, for subscribing. You help to make all of this work. We're soon going to be on Locals and soon going to be on Subscribestar, so you'll have different ways to support us. Many people don't like Patreon. I'm beginning to understand why. So yes, thank you all for all that you do to help us feel like we're doing something worthwhile and like we're not so goddamn alone.
I love that our wedding photo here behind me. It's you're in black and I'm in white, and it looks like a yin and yang. It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah,
I should have a white dot on my jacket, and you should have a black dot. Wouldn't be
well, I have flowers that look
True.
dark.
Flowers.
Flowers.
All right. Want to get a hold of us? The Melt Podcast at protonmail.com, or
you can always email me at hunter-muse.protonmail.com.
Go to
hunter-muse at protonmail.com.
Go to the website, themeltpodcast.net, and on the top menu, you will be able to find all of the different places that we are in this interspersed in the interwebs.
That's a fact.
We love you. Take care of yourselves. And fucking great stuff coming, guys.
Yeah, that's a fact, too. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Meow.